Young, back to throw. In trouble, he's going to be sacked. No, gets away. He runs, gets away again, goes to the 40, gets away again, to the 35, cuts back at the 30, to the 20, the 15, the 10. He dives, touchdown, 49ers.
Former San Francisco 49ers Super Bowl champion, NFL MVP, Hall of Famer. I don't know what else I could put in there. Steve Young, whose new book, Quarterback, My Life Behind, or QB, My Life Behind the Spiral, is joining us this morning on KSL News Radio. It's Drew Steele. How are you, sir?
Drew, great. Thanks. Great. I'm doing great. It's good to be in Salt Lake.
I'll tell you, I was just going to ask you, how's it feel to be back here in the state?
Good. Well, we get here a lot. My folks live here. My brother lives in Orem. My sister lives in Provo. You know, we got cousins galore, so we're here quite a bit. But
yeah. You ever?
Hey, look, this weather in October, ski resorts are upset, but everybody's super happy right now.
Yeah, it's not bad. You know, I've been here for about 3 months from Florida, 30 years at sea level. And so being here, it has been, everybody laughs when I say that, 30 years at sea level. Listen, when you're 4,000 plus feet up on a constant basis, you tend to feel, I wonder what was that like? You know, because that was the first thing that came to my mind. So here you are, you're BYU football, right? You're 4,000 feet up, and then you have to go to other places, other stadiums, and play. So does that affect you?
I think it was always an advantage. That's why the Denver Broncos have always had that advantage at 5,200 feet. Is that people are not acclimated. You come in from San Francisco, Oakland, or L.A. and you can play the Broncos and San Diego. I mean, it's the difference. So I always thought we suffered when we went to Fort Collins and played at Colorado State because they were actually higher.
Yeah. Can you get any higher?
Killer.
Right. QB, My Life Behind the Spiral, Steve Young's new book, and Steve Young joining us this morning on KSL News Radio. I just want to let you know about this little inside information maybe you haven't heard about yet, but lefty quarterbacks. Yeah, it's not going to work. It's just not going to. Has a coach ever told you that?
That's one of the big stories. I went to BYU, and Doug Scoville was the famous offensive coordinator. BYU was one of the three, maybe Stanford and Miami were the only schools that were throwing the ball. It was really kind of a pro offense. It was very attractive. It's what I wanted to do, even though I was a wishbone quarterback in high school. And I remember him pulling me aside my freshman year, and really, it was one of the more deflating conversations when he said, "Look, Steve, I just want you to know, I will not coach a lefty." And I'm like, well, what?
Yeah.
Why would you not want to coach a lefty? What does that matter?
Yeah.
He says, I don't think lefties should be quarterbacks. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
You can't say that.
So what happened? So how did you work all that out?
So that was it. So what happened is, famously for me, I finished my freshman year. I learned how to throw the ball by watching Jim McMahon, and once I learned how to throw it right, I was killer. And so Lavelle said, "Look, you're 8th string. Doug doesn't want to coach a lefty. In the end, we probably play defense, and if you want to play." And so then we made the switch at Christmas time. And Tom Homo, who's now the AD down there, he said, "Tom's going to help you, teach you how to play corner, and you can start doing dropbacks in the winter practices." So I started doing that, but I'd stay after and throw with the quarterbacks because I'd learned to throw. And it's like, look, I want to play quarterback. and so I would throw them, and lo and behold, at the turn of the year, Doug Scoville takes the job at San Diego State. So he leaves, and in comes Ted Tollner. And Ted comes down to watch us throw after practice, and he says to me, "Why aren't you playing quarterback?" "I'm watching you throw." And I was like, "Well, because they thought I couldn't, they didn't want to coach a lefty." And he goes, "That's stupid." So he goes and talks to Lavelle and says, "Lavelle, give me 30 days of spring camp. Just give me half of them. Give me 14 days, 2 weeks, essentially, of spring ball. And if it works, great. If not, we'll move them back." And Lavelle says, "Okay, that's fine." And so then I got those 2 weeks, and in those 2 weeks, Jim McMahon, I was trying to fight to back up, he was hurt throughout spring. So I had all this opportunity that came out of spring ball, and by the end of spring ball, I was backing up Jim McMahon. So I moved up all those spots, and then that was it. So I went from a coach telling me never a lefty to backing up by the spring.
Wow. Steve Young, QB, My Life Behind the Spiral, his new book, and he's joining us this morning on KSL News Radio, talking a little bit about his time here in Utah and BYU. And I have to ask you this, in other ways, maybe emotionally, some of the ways that going to school in Utah and going to BYU specifically helped you emotionally.
Well, I grew up, I can remember vividly, I was at Meadowmore Elementary School in Cottonwood, and we moved to Connecticut from Salt Lake City when I was, after my second grade. But I remember first grade, I wouldn't go to school. And my parents were like, well, you got to go to school. I said, I don't want to go to school. Well, why not? Well, I couldn't articulate. I didn't understand why, but I didn't want to go away and take this dangerous new situation at school. I just didn't want to go. And I don't know what had hit me between kindergarten and first grade, but so then the first couple of weeks, my mom walked me to school and they would stay there. And finally after a couple of weeks, I got more comfortable, and then she didn't need to stay. In second grade, I remember my parents picking me up to take me to my cousins in Sandy because they were going to go away for the weekend, and they were going to leave me at my cousins. I remember feeling like I was going to die. Mm. And so as a kid, you're like, okay, I don't know what to do about that other than I don't like being away from home. But it wasn't until my mid-30s that someone said, hey, look, you have childhood separation anxiety. You have it in spades. And I was like, holy cow, that's great news, because I had no idea what this was that I was dealing with really kind of throughout my life, sprinkled in a lot of my experience. And, and I remember those experiences vividly. And now finding out that in my mom's side of the family, my mom's brother and his kids and sprinkled, and even in my son, there's few people that are touched by this separation anxiety, and how, knowing about it, understanding it, really powerful, so that you can kind of work with it.
Right. Yeah, that's part of the battle, right? Once you find out, then it makes it so much easier to figure out how to tackle it. Yeah.
You name it. It was huge. And that's one of the interesting things in the book, for me at least, to tell my kids. That's how I got started on this project, was that my kids were coming home from school and saying, Dad, I heard, the story I heard today about you and Joe Montana, or something, and they weren't true, or they were off, and I thought, my kids aren't going to know the truth. They're going to grow up and always be hearing stories from other people, and I'm going to have to be, correcting them. And I said, I need to write it down. I kept some journals, little, but I wasn't great at it, and so that's why Jeff Benedict, who helped me write it, really was about writing it for my kids. That's the only thing I was interested in. I never thought that I would have a book to give out, and so over 4 years, I put together so that I could hand them something for when they were interested, or if they ever were interested, that they could at least know what my story is for me, rather than hearing it from the street.
Right.
And that's how we got here.
Yeah. Steve Young, QB, My Life Behind the Spiral is his new book, and he joins us this morning on KSL News Radio. So earlier this morning on KSL, this was a question from someone in the newsroom who was like, all right, you have to ask him this. You mentioned you helped, or at least tried to help talk Ty Detmer into returning to BYU as a coach. Is that right? So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, when we were making when Bronco left and we were trying to find a coach, I had noticed in the pros, there's very few pro teams that have a history that they can draw on. There's a culture. There's a what is a Steeler? And whenever I go to Pittsburgh, it would be about their defense and their history. They embraced it in such a fundamental way. And I noticed that even if their defense wasn't that good, it still led who they were, defined them, and it helped. I said, man, it really helps teams distinguish themselves when they have something to draw on. The 49ers, through the 80s and 90s, they can draw on these things that you don't want to lose. You don't want to just leave behind. There's too much that it can form you for success. And so for BYU, I was really advocating for making sure that we drew on our history, that how we played and how we threw the ball, and that we were offensive focused. And it doesn't mean you don't play great defense at all, but you draw on it. That's how you recruit. And so finding a coach that that there was obviously there was some people that wanted to run the wishbone, and I thought, boy, as much as I respect coaches, I really, my opinion, not that it mattered, but we need to really embrace our past, and not because I was part of it, just because I've seen the value in it. And I think that Kalani was really focused on that, and it was really a part of what he wanted to do at BYU. And he was and you can see how he coaches. He goes for two, at Utah.
Right.
Come back. I mean, that's people are going to be. It didn't work. Okay, but people are inspired by it.
Yeah.
People want to play for him. He's going to be a great recruiter. And so part of it was you can't be independent. That's a long answer. Sorry for this, but I'm building into it. But you can't be independent.
Yeah.
And a coach come in from a new coach and carry all that water. It's just too much to go. Look at that schedule. And I always dreamed that Ty would be. I always said when Ty was with me in San Francisco, he was my teammate. No one knew football better. He didn't have the physical presence to go play kind of for every day in the NFL, but he played for a long time. But as I played with guys, there's guys that just understood the game intuitively. That I knew, it was like he was a great coach to me. From his, I come off the field and Ty say, "Hey, did you see the safety?" I'm like, "Oh, kinda." He goes, "Well, if you just watch him, Steve, he'll tell you what you want." I'm like, I've been playing for 15 years, and Ty's telling me like how to read defenses, and so I knew that Ty was going to be a great coach. And I knew also that he loved branching and loved sitting down in Texas and never would get out of there. So part of it was like convincing him, Ty, you got to do this. You got to get out of Texas, come up, because it's a real rigor, recruiting and coaching. But I always knew that he'd be phenomenal at it.
Right.
So that when the Kalani and Ty, sorry for the long answer, but when Kalani and Ty finally agreed to come together, I just thought this is the best.
Yeah.
The best thing. So hopefully that works out that way.
Steve Young joining us this morning on KSL News Radio. QB, My Life Behind the Spiral is his new book. This is Drew Steele filling in for Doug Wright this morning. And before we go, Steve, I have to ask you this question, a little self-indulgent question, if you don't mind, so you can help me. Because I do this with everybody in the building. I've been here for 3 months. I love this state. I soak every bit of it in, every area, all the little, from fry sauce to everything else. I'm loving every. Okay, so here it is. I need for you to do for me what others have done in the building. Give me one or two of the must-dos, must-haves, have to do. You're here in the state of Utah. You're living here now. Give me some of your favorites that I can't miss out. Me personally.
You got to climb to the top of Timpanogos. Take a morning, start out about 4, and just get to the top.
To the top. Wait. Okay. How about for people who have a problem just getting out of bed in the morning?
There's no ropes. You don't have no carabiners. It's a walk, but it's a long one, but it's worth it.
Okay.
It's one of the all-timers. That's one.
All right.
What else? It's a lot of I tell you to watch my freshman year, I went to Floyd Johnson, our equipment manager at BYU, and I said, "Look, I want Danny Ainge is this great team with Scott Rooney and Fred Roberts, and just one of the best basketball teams in the state's ever seen." And I couldn't have 4 tickets as a freshman, and so I said, "Fred, if I could," I asked him if I could be the towel boy for the opposing team, and if I cleaned up the visiting locker room, I could sit on the bench with the opposing visiting team. He gave me the job, so I watched that whole year from the bench. That BYU football and the basketball season with Danny Ainge. And so I was just thinking to myself, what have I always loved? And I was like, well, I'm sorry, you might not be able to do that, Drew. You sit on the side, sit on the bench with it. BYU.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'll tackle the mountain first, and then I'll get back to you on the rest of it. Okay. Good stuff. All right, Steve Young, My Life Behind the Spiral, QB, the new book. And listen, all the best to you, sir. And I appreciate a few minutes of your time today.